Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. Liz,
Buenas
don't worry,
tardes.
we'll switch to English in a little while. Buenas tardes a todos. Buenos días. Feliz 2021. Regresando aquí con nuestro programa semanal de Conversando con CISOs. Andrés, ¿cómo te va?
Pues bueno, muy bien. Primero que todo, buenas tardes a todos y efectivamente sí tenemos espectadores. Ahí van llegando las personas, entonces darle
Los-
también a ellos la bienvenida. A todos los que van llegando, decirle feliz año. Empieza un 2021 eh, con muchos
mm,
desafíos y bueno, empezamos el año yo creo que muy bien. ¿Sí?
sí,
Entonces, pues no,
vamos,
excelente. Hay que decir que
excelente.
empezamos muy, muy bien.
Exacto, hemos estado escuchando durante las vacaciones decembrinas el tema del ataque de SolarWinds y entonces tenemos una invitada muy especial, a Elizabeth Wharton. Ella es el VP, what's your title at Scythe?
Chief of Staff.
Chief,
So,
Chief of Staff at Scythe.io. Really, really good company that's making a lot of waves in the industry, right, Liz?
oh, of course, of course. We're an adversary emulation platform, among other things.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And we had your CTO was in Tactical Edge, the English version, in July, August timeframe. It seems so long ago already. It's like,
Right,
but
right.
so everyone, Liz, it's a veteran of Tactical Edge. She was with us in the first CISO's Latin Summit that we had in Cartagena in 2019. And Liz and a lot of our friends, all 2020, we keep exchanging photos and memories of Cartagena. And we all miss Cartagena
Right.
so much.
The virtual edition this summer just wasn't the same.
It wasn't the same. We
Oh, of
tried.
No,
course,
I
that
mean, I tried to match my background
Yeah.
to the beautiful, location, but it just didn't. It wasn't the same.
Yeah, it's but so hopefully this year 2021 is better. So let's go into the topic at hand. So SolarWinds, the SolarWind attack or hack, I mean, it's on everybody's mind almost on a hourly basis. You don't stop. Not too long ago, there was a new site that came up. That was not too long ago, right, Andres? The solar,
yeah. Mhm.
what's it called? Solar flare? Is that what you said?
Solar leaks.
Solar leaks.
Leaks.
So solar
Now is
leaks.
the
Yeah.
solar leaks is the new publication about all information that was revealed in the attack. But this is the information that we have,
Yeah.
and the site that I say solar leaks dot net.
Solarleaks.net. .net. So in case you haven't heard that one, Liz, which I'm pretty sure that you have, so they're putting up for sale the Microsoft Windows source
Mhm.
code, Cisco source code, SolarWinds source code, FireEye Private Red Teams tools source code, and they're asking, if you want to buy this, go ahead. All of them, you can have all of them for $1 million plus, you got to give them a bonus. This is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, and you should always trust when criminals are putting source code for sale. Absolutely, especially considering the nature of some of the breach itself, when it was, the updates.
Yeah.
So, hey, I mean, trust them. And don't worry, I guarantee they're not putting any backdoors or anything else in the code that you can purchase.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's extremely
totally agree.
well. It's part of
Quality guaranteed by
so
criminals.
so just that it's part of the supply chain risks, right? And to talk about trust, do you actually trust this to download that source from the supplier? Do you trust the supplier? I mean, so that's the whole topic of this conversation is a supply chain. Um, FireEye was affected, Microsoft was affected, Cisco is affected, and the common denominator seems to be SolarWinds, right? But we're talking huge companies. In our world, should we worry about our own supply chain environment? I mean, is that something that we should definitely be worried about?
Always. I mean, you can't, I mean, just as, anytime it's as Wendy Nather, a frequent Tactical Edge
Yes.
friend and expert and CISO advisor extraordinaire, we say, it goes back to the zero trust and building out that. I mean, always assume that something's going to go wrong, that someone in your supply chain is not going to change the baked in passwords, that what was it, SolarWinds 1234, or just assume that's going to happen. And from a executive level, what you then do is build in that risk and do what you can to minimize the inevitable breach or the impact, and how quickly can you react and address and remediate.
So we go back to we continue talking about quick reaction time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, and last year we started talking about it's no longer the time to discover, which is extremely important because that determines how quickly we react, but also how it's more important right now is how quickly you react when you
Mm-hmm.
find this information. So that's a quick reaction.
But I have a question, because remember that we speak about react and response, that are different
Yes.
issues. That's
excellent point.
yes, because it's not the same react to respond. When you respond, you are prepared. When you react, you are not prepared. And this is, I think that this is the great point here that we all have to learn, is how do you prepare the relationship with this third part, and how do you prepare the possibility that they can be attacked too, not only us.
Well, and one of the things that I've seen kind of the fallout is when your incident response contract is with, I don't know, FireEye. And that was probably the attack vector of how they got into your system in the first place. How do you balance that? But it's the response. It's, do you have a plan? And you can't imagine everything, but what steps have you done to be able to mobilize? And where I'm really going to be curious to see how this plays out is in the insurance, because responding is expensive. And you try to do your best. You get the cyber insurance coverage that should protect yourself, and your company may also be part of someone else's supply chain. And how do you, if you are the attack vector of how they got in, then liability and minimizing that. And when you have statements coming out, I read somewhere today, someone else is linking like, oh, this was a Russian sponsored attack. Oh, here's all the evidence. You have to be careful how far that gets attributed, because you have the court case now with NotPet coming out, stemming from NotPetya, where Zurich denied coverage for a company because it was a nation state.
Nation state, right.
And granted, there's so many nuances in that case. That's not necessarily a good guide. But it reminds you, look at your insurance coverage, see your cyber coverage, and hold your breath when anytime the government or others start, down the attribution route.
Let's go. I mean, again, this conversation, I think, with all conversations with cybersecurity, can go in so many
So
directions.
many
It's
signatures. Yes,
unfreaking
yes.
real. But this is a good one because we've been having conversations and we have programs in the last year where we spoke about cyber insurance and how effective is cyber insurance and what covers. I learned a lot of stuff about that, right? And one of the things that I learned was about cyber insurance comes in because they help you cover the cost for investigating the breach, and that was good. But another thing that I remember reading, and again, Liz brings it up, and Liz is a lawyer, so she knows exactly what she's talking about. But NotPetya, when it was attributed by the government, and the government said, the U.S. government said, this is a state-sponsored attack. Therefore, it turned into a cyber war, correct? And the little fine print for on all the insurances, not only cyber, but all insurances, stipulates that anything that is that it's within a war time or war frame or war location, this insurance is
This is
not
not.
valid.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that the government list, because I've been waiting for the government, everyone is saying Russia, Russia, Russia. The government is not
Yeah.
saying it. And there's a lot of reasons why they may or may not want to say it. But will this be one of them from lessons learned? If they say this, look at all the mess that you will create, because the insurance companies are like, thank you, we don't cover.
Exactly. I mean, and one of the other, every time I read an article back in December that was talking about, oh, this is a cyber Pearl Harbor, I'm thinking, geez, stop, please stop. Like, that's just bad, bad, bad business for many reasons. It's hyperbole. It's, but specifically for this, because a lot of, and not all insurance policies and endorsements. So kind of putting on the lawyer hat. I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer unless you're SCYTHE, and then I am. But read your endorsements, because you can purchase coverage that in some cases insurers have kind of caught on, and they'll sell you all kinds of stuff. So look at your coverage, your endorsements, and see what exactly, because there are different caveats. And yeah, hopefully the government learned from NotPetya, or is at least being cautious, because that also triggers a whole slew of other, like, oh, well, now we're at war. When did the war again,
when did it start? Exactly.
who is participating? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at doing business in other countries, or, export controls, how that ripple effect of what you're selling, the services, especially a company like SCYTHE, we have to constantly look at what are our services, what are we saying, when you start getting into those, when those words start getting thrown around.
Yeah, it's incredible. Luis Torres here makes a good comment, and again, this is going to take us in a different path. So I think we're done with cyber insurance for now. He's saying, one of the things is to perform a vendor risk assessment before any contract with third parties. But what exactly, when I look at vendor risk assessments, right? I don't think that any of the questions is, well, who's your supplier? Who are your major suppliers, or are those questions in vendor risk assessments? I don't recall seeing anything like that.
And kind of to pull from my background in aviation. So when you get into some of these specialized areas, there is one software provider that provides load balancing software that's approved by the FAA for every single airline carrier.
Okay, so single point of failure. Okay.
So what happened last year, I think it was last year, maybe 2019. Sorry, it's all a blur. I'll be honest. But there were a couple of instances, at least twice, where there was a complete ground stop with 7 major carriers across everywhere because the software had a glitch and it went down. So you can do your third party, your vendor risk assessment, but if that is your only option, what the assessment will do is it will tell you, okay, we need to be more cautious. We need to have backup systems for our response, but there's nothing we can really do to avoid this vendor. You can put pressure on the vendor, okay, but when it's the only option, when it is truly the sole source, because in procurement, I always love how people say, oh, sole source. Well, is it? Yeah. But in certain cases, it is. It is the only provider approved to perform that service.
Wow. So, but will vendor risk assessments, will they help identify this type of issues with SolarWinds that came, I mean, I doubt it. I don't think it goes back 2 or 3 steps behind the actual supply chain.
Well, you're going to check the boxes. I mean, that's it. You're asking someone to self-assess or look through and oh, well, did we do this? Sure. There's a password. Is it the hard code? Is it password 1234? Well, okay. And it's also a snapshot in time. So when the backdoor is embedded in an update, when the update may not have been covered, oh, okay, we did this. I mean, what was it? McAfee had an update they pushed out a decade ago. But this impacted when I was working in state government because it was a bad update. It wasn't nefarious. It was just bad code they rushed out, but it caused all of the computer systems for multiple states to just go into the infinite loop of updating, and never go out. A vendor risk assessment wouldn't necessarily have caught that. I mean, how were they to know that they would rush out code that was bad?
But and again, we just want to make sure we're not saying don't do the vendor risk assessment because it's better to do something, right? But again, once you do that, as Luis Torres says here as well, if in single cases, like the airport, the airlines, then you need to start looking at BCP. You already did your vendor risk. Now you got to look at your business continuity plans. You have to look at what was the big word that we used last year, Andres, with Edson Vitoriano from Chile, resilience.
Resilience.
You have to start looking into your how resilient you are to all these things. But
no, that I say that resilience in all the chain.
All the chain, yes.
From the beginning until the end. Even your third part, because it's not only that you be resilient, you need that your third part have to be resilient too.
Third party,
and you have to build this relationship, but that happened. This not happen only with this vendor risk assessment or BCP. You have to work with them. Because let's say a point important for me is you have to work with them. It's not only that I say you have to do this, and we have to work together to stay close and try to better all the time.
And build into your contracts when you're working or your procurement process of knowing who to call if having that point of contact or having that information, because and even in SolarWinds, I mean, the Orion platform was the industry standard, and their own internal assessments and business plans said, hey, we don't have a market competitor with the same reach that we have. So again, but knowing, oh, I think we have a problem with this. I need up to the minute information. And I do think that the information release and the communication, once the depth was starting, people were starting to discover, they've been transparent, or at least more so than perhaps some of the other incidents where it was like, okay, fudge, what are we going to, like, all right, this is bad. This is really bad. But who do you call? and having that information and building into the contracts that at least putting it may be a hollow representation or warranty, but saying, hey, are you following these minimum standards? Are you checking the box? Kind of going back to that plan. And who do we contact if it goes wrong?
Yeah, that's good. So that's now we're going into the incident response plan, right? The IRP is making, yeah, but as I'm saying, all of this has ramifications. One little thing goes all over the place, and part of the CISOs, we have to be aware of how this type of incident, what it affects, what it touches, and what we have to make sure that we're up here. Because I'm thinking about this, right? So one of the reports that I was reading, it says that the companies that were mostly affected were in certain regions of the world, right? It said the US, Europe, and Asia. And I was like, it didn't list Latin America. So, right? So our Latin American companies go, hey, okay, we're we don't have to worry about this. And the answer is no, because what you said, Liz, and Andres, FireEye was how we all found out that this happened, basically, right? If I remember correctly, FireEye came in, and then a week or 2 weeks later, it was like, oh crap, it came from this one and everything. So let's say you have a company in Colombia that is using a service from a third party, right, for monitoring or whatever. But this company is also in Colombia, and they use the tools from FireEye, right, to provide those services, because I'm assuming that FireEye sells it and you can use it. What do you do? I mean, how far as that small company in Colombia, how far should they go back and find out, do on their own? Should they just contact their local company and then trust them? Again, that it goes all the way to the trust level, right? I mean, is this company is going to be open with the information, like, yes, we do use FireEye, and let's work together? Are we seeing that stuff in the industry list? Do you think because FireEye was open, everybody else is also being open?
No, well, and the other thing is you're assuming everyone knows exactly who they're really working with. Exactly. I mean, one of the I get contacted by our sales team saying, hey, we want to do business with this one company, but by the way, their engineering team is located in a different country or is not, and they're still part of the same company. So just because one company is located somewhere doesn't mean that their entire, they may have outsourced stuff. And then when you look at Microsoft and others being impacted, and it kind of goes back to the assume breach. Like, assume someone somewhere in your food, in your supply chain has been impacted, because that's just the safer posture. So keeping an eye on the different alerts that come out and running the test, saying, hey, if we are impacted by this, how can we check? How can we scan? How did they get in? What were the common attack points, and are we vulnerable to them? Did we run that update? Can we go do a search? And you don't have to have the answer, but know how to get the answer within your company. Okay. And have that process in place. That, those are the kind of the small things you can do to anticipate the resilience that Andreas noted. We're going to get hit at someone. So how can we make it a little less painful, and how can we get back online quicker?
So that's good. So that brings it back down to me, because now I no longer have to make sure that I have a big group that is going to go and investigate how far the chain goes back, right? But now I just bring it back again, and I'm responsible for my own environment, and which is what we've been saying before, right? You need to know who are your suppliers, and then monitor them. At that point, I know that FireEye has listed, and I think they had a webinar yesterday that was pretty good, or this morning, about recommendations, what you need to do to protect yourself, to identify those well-known IOCs, right? So that's, you just need to continue doing what you're doing for yourself or your environment, and make sure that you're listening and that you understand what you're looking for.
And
it's up to you.
I was saying, and this is a plug for the community that I know as you have built around Tactical Edge, information sharing. Before it comes out necessarily in the press, the media or stuff, people talk. And that was one of the biggest things working with a major, world's busiest airport. If you have your ear to the ground, other airports or other company, aviation industry contacts, other CISOs are noticing things. Maybe they've heard a rumor or noticed something, and having that communication so that you can, if somebody sees something, they can be like, hey, is anybody else noticing this? And get a jump on things and say, oh, well, I haven't seen that, but I know we use that vendor. I swear I just saw a contract come through, or they were in my report. But having those communities of information sharing becomes critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what? You do remember me a conversation that I had yesterday, that I say this is one issue for me when you try to create a relationship with your vendors, because many times you create a community with other CISOs, but you don't create a community with your vendors, and you need your vendors too.
Yeah, exactly.
This is because all the time you say, my relationship with my vendor is he tried to sell me whatever, not try to help me in these kind of topics. And you say no. Now the relationship have to change.
So
create
this is
a community.
Good differentiator for vendors who are listening to us. This is a good time for them to develop this. I'm serious, right?
Well, and invest in your sales engineers and those others who are building that technical relationship, because absolutely, don't call me on the 30th or the 31st of the last day of the quarter to make sure, like, that should not be our only contact. Ask me how it's going, or have someone, even if it's an automated touch, have that touch, have that, are there things we could be doing better? Or, hey, have you tried? Because even on the business side, I get very frustrated going, well, I didn't know that like this software also integrated with this, or did this feature. Gosh, I really wish somebody had told me. I would have used this more, or I would have upgraded our subscription. So this is an opportunity.
Right. So Liz, for the for what Scythe does with simulator, right? Attack simulators. How will that play into this scenario right now?
So multitude of different ways. We have kind of a shameless plug. I wish I was a little more technical in the sense of our CTO, George, has put together some great emulation. So when we start coming in and seeing this happening, we create simulated attacks that mirror some of the known IOCs, C2s, and build that so that you can run this against your system and detonate it, and it won't, as the joke was when I've created some of these campaigns, just to familiarize myself, that was like, they're so easy, even a lawyer can do it. But practicing dress rehearsals of, are we vulnerable to this? And not only does Scythe do that, but look to, MITRE ATT&CK,
yes.
Red Canary. There are others. I mean, while we're great, look at them and see, okay, but where Scythe has really started emphasizing lately is the blue team, getting them in on the conversation, and the purple team, creating that environment. So not only are you practicing and getting a good idea of where your vulnerabilities lie, that information only goes so far. It's the resiliency of the response. Is the response team, is the blue team within your organization getting the information they need to actually do something about it in a timely and effective and useful manner? So don't just run like, oh, okay, we're vulnerable to this. All right, well, how are we going to fix this?
Exactly. What's the next step is, okay, now we know what's the next step. During the tactical edge that we did together in July or August timeframe, we had Wendy Nather, and then we had Andy Ellis, two freaking brilliant people, right? And they both were talking about the same thing that you started, which is assume you're going to be breached, and how quickly are you going to respond, right? How quickly you're going to react and respond. And Wendy was saying that while she was doing an RSA keynote, that she has spoken with a person that tries to view into the future, what's coming. I don't know, you remember that conversation. And Wendy goes, well, so pose the question. And let's say that in that time, in July, let's say that during the call, Wendy said, what if something like SolarWinds gets hacked and a backdoor gets put into their code? How will you react, right? So all of us would probably in the industry would go like, well, that's not going to happen, right? But the exercise was, no, just play with that. So work backwards. Then Andy, the next day, he gave his presentation on how they do it to minimize that time to respond. And he went through an explanation of how when they were designing the new Akamai offices in Boston, how they came back and said, well, what if we cannot use these facilities? What if something happens and we can, how do we do? And so they built stuff. So he said, COVID hit. We're like, oh, we're ready. Because somebody asked that question. So it goes back, right, to right now. It's not late. We can take all of this as lessons learned. How do we start from here and get better and more mature in our environment? The first question is, are we ready for what happened? And how are we ready? What do we need to do to find out if we are, what I call it, vulnerable to this thing, right? And then take it from there. Don't believe that you're too late and there's nothing you can do, correct?
Well, and you've seen, there's always the copycat attacks and stuff. So if a hole has been exposed, do the assessment. Okay, well, maybe we dodged. I mean, that's going back to the insurance case was talking about. They were hit by NotPetya twice. And, with ransomware, it becomes almost, that's one of the big things is like, oh, well, sure, we'll pay, we'll get the keys. Well, how do you know they're not going to come back? And with the same attack, like, have you prepared? But also, I mean, aside from the crystal ball, like, you don't know what holes you have until you've run some of these simulations, until you've done that testing, seen what you've patched, and but having that plan too. I mean, one of the other things we learned during the Atlanta ransomware attack, or that was drilled home, and so I always have to mention this. I think I may have mentioned it in at least 2 of my presentations for you. Have backups, but also know where your response plan is. Yes. Go old school, have a paper copy of something, because when you realize that all of your stuff is corrupted, including, if someone has access to your documents, assume that they've accessed your response plan. And that maybe they've changed it, maybe they've cut you off from access to it. But if you have a printed copy somewhere, someone does, it allows you to respond quicker, because you don't have to do the head scratching of, oh, well, it's on this drive. Oh, that drive is currently locked with the ransomware. And it's
funny, Liz, with that one, you cannot believe how many times, after you said it, like I said, before last year or the year before, I mentioned this to some clients when we were doing IRP, and all of them I think about 6, 7 clients that I mentioned that all of them never thought about it, right? And again, those are the things that it's not because you don't know what you're talking about. It's just like those are the lessons learned. If it never happened to you, you never think about it. So once it happens to you once, then you're like, so obvious, right?
Right. It's, fool me once,
Exactly.
but fool me twice. And that it's those horrifying and awkward moments as you're sitting in the immediate response room and somebody says, oh, okay, well, why don't we pull up this file? And everyone kind of looks at each other and goes, huh, why don't we? Oops.
Oops.
Or call somebody, or, when then you realize, or will reach out to them in an email. It's like, oh, well, we've shut down our network to any external emails.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're not emailing our outside counsel. Somebody pick up the phone. Heavens forbid you have to actually call someone.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't have that information because it's on the response plan.
It's on the server that you've just taken down.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. So, Andres, all this again keeps coming back to me. It's like, wow. As I said before, is we don't have to think about, now I got to worry about something new, supply chain risk management and complicated. We don't actually have to. We have to just again focus on our own environment, how well we are doing the little things, right? That's all that it amounts to. Because again, the big question that I haven't seen asked many places, and maybe Liz, maybe you know the answer, maybe you don't. Do we know how did they actually there has to be a point where the attackers had access to SolarWinds environment. Do we know, has it been found out how it happened? Was it through a phishing? Was it through ransomware? Do we know how it happened, or anything like that? I haven't seen much of that information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I admittedly have been more focused on the impact.
The impact of it.
But yeah, I mean, it's especially when you look at even some of the, what was it, Parlor, the everyone, all that data, and it was, oh, it was a hack. It was like, well, was it really? Open source intelligence, somebody posted something they shouldn't, it included a little too much. It's like the screenshots.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone has reminded, especially as we work from home and have different information posted places, reminding employees not to have their passwords or other critical information.
You know how many times
Post it right behind them.
You know how many times I zoom in on those little yellow post-its when I see it on anybody's desk? By default, I always find myself doing it, and it's interesting.
I had to. So my better half, our original home office setup, were both of our desks facing away from each other, but we realized with the phone call, Zoom calls, it meant our cameras were facing the other's screen. So it took about one call where I'm like, everyone on this call with me can now see behind, so I can either do virtual background every time, or I was like, I'm just going to move out here and do that. But reminding people, like, it doesn't have to be sophisticated. It can be something as simple as that, and kind of doing those, or including those assessments of reminding people, hey, what is on camera now? Your home office may not be or your home work environment may not be as secure as perhaps your office. Scrub, going to those critical employees and saying, hey, let's do an assessment. Let's just look and see and double check that we're taking those basic, like, make them work for it. If it's going to be an attack, make it be a very sophisticated, fancy attack, and not just low-hanging fruit. Like, they need to earn that SolarWinds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I hear in the industry, well, it's again, right? Well, we're in the industry by default. Well, it's a state-sponsored attack. There's no defense against that, right? And absolutely, But again, we keep going back to the same thing, right? It's the basic things. How well are you doing the basic things? How much time have you spent looking at, you know, weird scenarios, and just based on that, test how prepared you are for weird scenarios? And at this point, we cannot say that, you know, that's not useful, because we have already, we went through 2020, you know, 365 days is a of a weird scenario. Just choose whichever day of 2020 you want to use, and that's your scenario that you know, for your tabletop or whatever type of exercises you want to use. um, so for so again, so we don't know the source of the attack, which is very, very interesting to me. That will be very interesting to find out. um, because the last report that I keep reading is about how sophisticated the attack
Yes.
was, right? And it says that the last one, that it was the whatever they use as part of the code developing, that they were waiting, that the program itself was waiting for a specific command, like let's say commit or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he heard that, then he knows that that's when it started to inject itself, because it's the last commit. They're not going to check after they do commit because they already done all the checks. How incredible is that?
But you put a special point, because this is the other topic of this is the time. The time is, this attack is not recently. This attack is not that they prepare on December, on November.
No, this is
It was
2019,
with
they're
that,
saying. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The time that have to wait to start this and prepare all. This is a long, long time. That is one of the reasons that all people say this is a nation state attack that have a long time of preparation. Um,
And it goes back to the saying, right? The, you know, the attackers are very patient. They don't have a timeline.
but
But you know, as we learned during the tactical edge events last time, we can use that to our advantage, right? They don't have a timeline. We do. So we can be more aggressive in fine tuning our networks and finding out what is strange out there. And again, solutions like what SCYTHE.io help us to do this, right? Help us to organize. The tools are out there. It's just a question of how do we use them, and also a question of time, because we don't have time to do this.
Yeah, no, and it's, I mean, especially with what we're seeing, like in the healthcare industry, you know, when you have attacks,
mhm,
I mean, it's one thing if they're bringing down or if it impacts, you know, a supplier for this or that, but when you think of like the wide ranging implications in the hospitals that were getting hit with all the ransomware, because not all attacks, I mean, SolarWinds was a wide net. And yes, they were targeting specific victims, but some of the ransomware is just hit or miss. Someone bought the code off, you know, off the black market. The subscription. I mean,
mm,
I've been amused by the different ransomware gangs, is the best, where they offer customer support and entire ticketing systems, and you know they don't care who it is. So yeah, running those assessments and having that drilled in, so it's muscle memory when
Yeah.
something happens, of working
mhm,
with. And one of the things, if anyone watching wants or needs a good framework for building out that purple team, like bringing out that integration between the blue team and the red team, SCYTHE has a library where we have put together a free uh, uh, purple team framework sample that you can use as a guide. And I'll you know, play around, like I said, download it, use it. We offer free workshops as well. And again, others do this too. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
you're not the only company dealing with this. And it gets back to the information sharing. But when opportunities arise either with your vendors or others in the industry, in the space, take advantage of them. Send your employees to the training, have them take the workshops, or, take advantage of those resources that you're not having to pay for, because it gets expensive enough as it is.
Yes, exactly.
And if you can maximize your budget, go for it.
Exactly. Liz, you mentioned ransomware many times, and I just want to bring this up. Maybe I've been hiding under a rock or something, but I've only heard two news, right? The major news. Well, three major news for me. One is about my Liverpool team; they're doing too well. But then you have the
now,
solar.
that itself is a sign of the apocalypse, I think.
Right. So then you have SolarWinds, and then you have the presidential stuff that's going on in the States. Ransomware. Well, we kept hearing ransomware, SolarWinds, president. No more ransomware. Did ransomware stop all of a sudden?
And now I'm going to forget which, I can't remember if it's state or local government that just got hit in the United States in the last 48 hours. But
Really?
I did, buried deep down, if you're looking for it, I'll have to find out that they're like, oh yeah, everything got taken offline. So it's there, but it's not as shiny and flashy, and it's not as exciting.
It's like old news.
Right.
2020. He died on December 31st.
Right. It's so 2019.
Yeah. But again, right. So this is what I'm getting at, right? We, as an industry, we're like cats. We just look at the little light, right? And then we go there, and then there's another light, and now we all move in that direction, and we forget about this other light. Again, and I keep repeating this, we got to go back to basics. We have to focus on doing the little things right. If we do the little things right, we will be okay with ransomware. Doesn't mean that we're not going to be attacked. It just means that we'll be okay. We can detect it. We can respond.
And make them work for it. If you know there's and I forget how many years after the fact, like a Shodan searches were still showing systems vulnerable to the heartbleed.
Yes.
Kind of stuff. Like, seriously, this is the easy part. It goes back to them. Make them work for it. Don't give them the low-hanging fruit. Just actually, except for SolarWinds is a bad example too. I remember all the different folks going, well, one of my customers said it's a good thing we hadn't installed that update and patched for this.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So because remember that the story was that it only affected systems that were patched after, I think it was March timeframe or something like that. And so everyone was saying, I didn't apply that patch, so I'm lucky. So now they go the opposite direction. Well, then let's not patch anymore. We're like, holy crap, we're going to create something completely awful. Don't, just stop. Yeah, as you say, this is not a low-hang, this is a special type of fruit. Right.
And I mean, and that gets into, of course, there are other systems where, yes, we installed the patch and it wasn't properly integrated for these other platforms that we use. So it caused all these other issues, but we're not going to get hit by this. And that is a dangerous kind of mentality to go through. It's assess the risks for your specific company. Like if you're using some legacy systems because it was designed X, to fit X requirements, and those are no longer applicable to you, of course, be familiar with what your systems need. Exactly.
Let's go back to the that statement about make it more difficult to the attackers, right? Jeff Bassett, I think is his name, right? From Verizon, the Verizon team that does the DBI. I think last year in the last B-sides that they did, B-sides Georgia, but I know that you were present because you were tweeting live his presentation. And he showed a good slide, right? That showed that defense in depth, even though people are saying it's dead and done, he says defense in depth works. He says, and he showed a slide, right? That if I remember correctly, that if you put just one if you don't put anything in there, your basics, you have almost a very linear, time, 10 minutes, let's say. But as soon as you put something in between, all of a sudden it's no longer 10 minutes. It went to like 60 something because they have to go through an additional 3 steps. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and they start giving up. If it's just in kind of putting the nation state style, the more sophisticated, that could put that in a separate bucket.
Exactly.
But if you're talking about the kind of unsophisticated, that they're going to do the same amount of damage. And yes, I feel so bad for the Verizon data breach report folks this year because it's going to be a completely different, on the one hand, I can't wait to read it.
Yes.
Because it's to see where the changes, and see what caught up with where the focuses are and where the shifts are. Even some of the FBI's own reports, in the US is business email compromise,
Yes.
business, they cannot drill it enough. But ransomware is catching up and, going through all that. But yeah, once you start putting in those roadblocks, it gets just a little bit harder and it starts dropping off just a little bit more and
Right.
just a little bit more. And so again, going back to you will still have an issue because your supply chain, inevitably, you may have built the best fortress possible, but there's no such thing as air gap. Something's coming in, something's going to disrupt it. And again, going back to Andrea's point, like, how resilient are you? How quickly can you respond? And if you've cut off certain entrance points, then you only have to focus over here, and that allows you to respond quicker.
Exactly. It's very interesting. Going back there, and I took some notes here, and I cannot read them. No, I was gonna write it when I forgot it. I'm getting old. I tell the group, and we're in a Twitter group. What do we call it? Something from Cartagena. I forgot what it was called. But
it changes names occasionally.
Yeah. But it's the group from states that we came to Cartagena for the CISOs. So we have our own little group, and we exchange stuff in there all the time. And I was telling them, I said, how I learned that I became really old when I had to get my own pill box, those boxes where you put your daily pills. Yeah. Monday, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So I forgot what I was going to say. I don't know. You have anything? Oh yeah, I was going to ask you. You had a good show with Mitch Parker, right? CISO at where is it? Is it Ohio? No, somewhere. Indiana Hospital, right? State. He's very focused on supply chain for the medical community. What do you have anything to say? Any pearls of wisdom regarding the SolarWinds for the medical?
No, because and that really hadn't hit as much and become big. We had recorded that. So for those who want to catch up, anytime you can find Mitch, and Mitch is presented at Tactical
yes.
Edge as well, but SCYTHE has a podcast focused on CISOs. So in one of our CISO stressed, and the question we pose each episode is, okay, as a CISO, what are you stressing? What are points that you're trying to drill home either within your organization or within your vendors? And really, Mitch has been on the front lines because with Indiana University and their health, you have the education system, so you have the school of medicine, you then have all of the different hospitals and clinics and doctors and providers. And you want to talk about legacy systems. The medical field is built on legacy, outdated, systems. But one of the things he has stressed and has done an amazing job of doing is building out that information sharing. He has been a focus of let's bring together other healthcare systems, other CISOs, what are you seeing, and building out not only within internally, but also with the law enforcement. And I know that dynamic changes based on where you are. So the same sense of community may not, in Central and Latin America may not be the same as with the US, but do build those, to the extent you have access to the information and sharing it. Yeah, that becomes critical, because things, indicators, alerts may come through those networks that before they become publicly available. And a lot of times that's because of lawyers. We ruin lawyers and insurers. We ruin everything.
And security engineers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But really, it's the law, because like, oh no, there's liability if we publicly announce this.
Yeah.
But the poor support desk or a IR team who's just spent 24 hours, doing their incident response, those are the grumblings you can start paying attention to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or you'll hear those ground swells before maybe you'll hear it in the news.
Exactly. Well, we're coming to the end, so just a couple of activities here, recommendations from this conversation. Information sharing is extremely important, right? As a CISO, go ahead and start your channel with other CISOs within your industry, within different industries. It doesn't have to be just your industry.
But I say that both.
Yeah, you
I
gotta do
think
both.
that both.
You
have to know that the others
what are
and
they
your parent and the others outside of your
bubble.
sector. Yes. Because remember that you have knows that you knows, who knows that you knows.
Yeah.
But you have the other who knows that you don't know.
You don't know, exactly.
That this is the point in that you have to be curious to find these answers.
All your blind spots.
Your adversaries are working there
as well.
Your adversaries are working in your unknowns that you don't know.
Okay.
That this is the great point.
Great point.
That I was reading about anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is a concept, but try to describe this. Create your curiosity in this space that all people don't know and you don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Finding out. Yeah. Just make sure that you don't have any blind spots. So that's one, information sharing. Do your basics right. You just need to do your basics right most of the time. Make it more difficult for the attackers. If you can somehow put an additional layer, go for it. Don't listen to, defense in depth is over. No, it'll help in the long run if you can just do that. And
but I use a word that Liz used in this sentence. Try to optimize your budget to do this, because it's not to do a lot of layer or put a lot of layer. No, try to do the optimize things that create the difficult way to adversary hack successful.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to make it difficult for them. And then the last thing is just worry about your environment, worry about yourself. Don't worry about SolarWinds got hacked. Oh my God. Let's find out everything about them so we can apply lessons learned to us. No, relax. Focus on your thing. SolarWinds has like a gazillion security, billions of dollars. We don't. You focus on yourself, do the basics right. Liz, I really appreciate your time here.
Yes.
Fantastic. Good seeing you again. And
eventually I will become proficient enough in Spanish so that I can not torture y'all with having to translate between the two.
No, that's fine. Santa Marta in October. Yeah, we'll be in Santa Marta in October. For Ricardo Cepeda, el Solar Leaks es un ejemplo de dónde están colocando el código que se han robado a la venta. Eso es solo. All right. La invitación a todos para la próxima semana. El sábado Andrés y yo regresamos a Conversando Ciberseguridad en nuestro registrado. Bendiciones a todos. Feliz 2021. Liz, thank you very much again and Happy New Year.
Recordarles a todos que empezamos de nuevo miércoles y sábados.
Exacto. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you, Liz.
Hasta luego.